In this video I'm going to discuss what the average German knew about the death camps. To what extent they were aware of what happened to the Jews under Nazi occupation. Keep watching. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new, I'm Stefan. I'm a Dutch history teacher. I make videos about history for you. If you find it interesting, please consider subscribing. Also hit that notification bell. And there's a big chance that this video is demonetized. So therefore, if you want to support me, please do so. You can do that via Patreon and via PayPal. The links are in the description. Let's discuss some background first. In 1933, Hitler gained power. The Weimar Republic came to an end and Nazi Germany was born. According to Hitler, the Jews were responsible for the country's problems and needed to be dealt with. In 1935, the Nuremberg laws were implemented. Jews in Nazi Germany were now officially considered as second-class citizens. For example, marriages between Jews and non-Jews were now illegal. In 1938, the Reichskristallnacht, also known as the Reichspogromnacht or the Night of the Broken Glass, happened. It was a widespread pogrom in Nazi Germany. Around 100 Jews were killed, presumably more, thousands were interned, and tens of thousands fled the country. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland and the Second World War started. Nazi Germany now found itself governing a significant amount of Jews. The Germans set up the so-called general government, which basically became the dumping ground for the undesirable people, the Jews and the Poles. Understand that many Poles and Jews already became victims of mass shootings carried out by the SS-Einsatzgruppe as soon as the German invasion of Poland occurred. The Nazis also set up concentration camps to intern Polish people. One of these camps was Auschwitz, which was the future extermination camp. In Polish cities inside the general government, Jews were being put in secluded ghettos. Soon these ghettos became overcrowded and death by hunger and disease was rampant. In 1941, June, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union and took territory quickly. Now even more Jews lived under Nazi rule. In the summer of 1941, the Nazis started to shoot Soviet Jews. Around 1 million Jews have been shot in Eastern Europe. These killings were carried out by the notorious Einsatzgruppe, who in several occasions were assisted by local collaborators. Think of Lithuanians and Ukrainians. In some cases, also regular German units took part in the executions. In some cases, German soldiers witnessed the killings as some kind of execution tourists, which also happened during the German invasion of Poland 1939. What were these Germans thinking of these executions? What were their thoughts about it? It is one thing to be an anti-Semite, but it's another to approve the murder of hapless civilians. One German soldier wrote 9 months after Operation Barbarossa started. The corpses, which used to be thrown without order onto a heap, have been sorted out as well as possible, and lime has already been scattered over the 500,000 Jews who were shot. This isn't the place to go into detail about what happened here. Another German soldier wrote to his wife, "The Jews are being completely exterminated. Please don't think about it. That's how it has to be. And don't tell R about it. Leave it for later." And with R, he meant their son. So what you see here is that these German soldiers approved of the killings. This is how it has to be. However, they are aware of the fact that the people back home aren't ready, so to say, to accept this reality. Studies of German soldiers' letters found that the fate of the Jews in Eastern Europe was either not mentioned at all or only peripheral. So what about the German public? To what extent were the Germans aware of what happened to the Jews in the East? Well, they were aware of it. The news leaked back via men on leave, as well as film that was sent to Germany to be developed. In the autumn 1941, the execution squads moved westward to the Baltics and German-occupied Poland and continued their bloody work. One German who was aware of it was Friedrich Kellner. Friedrich Kellner was a social democrat who wrote about life in Nazi Germany. with the goal to expose the crimes of the Nazis. And on the 28th of October 1941, he wrote the following. A soldier on leave here said he personally witnessed a terrible atrocity in the occupied part of Poland. He watched as naked Jewish men and women were placed in front of a long, deep ditch and, upon the order of the SS, were shot by Ukrainians in the back of their heads, and they fell into the ditch. Then the ditch was filled in as screams kept coming from it. These inhumane atrocities are so terrible that even the Ukrainians who were used for the manual labor suffered nervous breakdowns. Around the same time, towards the autumn of 1941, the deportation of Jews from the Reich started. From mid-October till November 9th, the first 25 trains with Jews from Vienna, the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, as well as 5,000 Roma arrived in the Łódź ghetto. Its second wave followed after that, where the Jews from the Reich were deported to the Baltics. Many elderly Jews and war veterans were sent to Theresienstadt near Prague. The scale was curtailed because of the transport crisis on the Eastern Front. The local SD, the intelligence agency of the SS and Nazi Party, reported. The Führer is said to want to be informed by the 15th of January 1942 that not a single Jew remains within the borders of the German Reich. In Russia, the Jews are said to have been put to work in former Soviet factories, while the elderly and the sick Jews are to be shot. German people immediately grasped that the deportations of their neighbors was not a local affair. For example, the many bans on park benches and swimming pools. These were local affairs. However, this was a central decision that was carried out across the whole of the Reich. As was the decision last September 1941, where the German Jews were forced to wear the yellow star. On the 7th of November 1941, Friedrich Kellner, the social democrat we talked about earlier, he wrote the following about anti-Jewish laws that were announced. Why so many words? Just say Jews are not people but slaves. This would not be nice but truthful. From this official order breathes the spirit and essence of National Socialism. The Jews who emigrated from Germany should thank God that the treatment of Jews who remained is cruel, relentless, and inhuman. Their fate is pitiful. By the end of 1941, the deportation of German Jews in the Reich started. German Jews received their summons and prepared for their departure, packing clothes and preparing food for the way. They were instructed to leave the furniture of their apartment behind and hand the keys to the caretaker of the building. First, they had to report at a collection point, and their luggage was checked for forbidden items. Often, items that were allowed were also confiscated, and they had to pay a fee for the deportation as well as a donation, so to say, for 25% of the furniture they left behind. This was basically the SS who wanted the share of the Jews before their household went to the Ministry of Finance. Later, in some cases, the furniture of Jews was being auctioned. From there, they marched to the railway station. In the city of Forchheim, 12 Jews were marched to the local railway station as a crowd of people expressed their interest and great satisfaction, according to a police report. In many places, this was the first collective event of Jew baiting since the 1938 pogrom. The marches were accompanied with ill-wishers who chanted and cursed at them. The shootings that occurred in Eastern Europe proved to be ineffective. It was time-consuming. It costed ammunition, and it was psychologically exhausting for those who had to carry out the executions. In January 1942, the Wannsee-Konferenz took place, where Nazi leaders came together to discuss about the final solution for the so-called Jewish question. And they decided that the Jews had to be exterminated. And this was to be facilitated in death camps, where the Jews were being gassed. The Jews therefore were no longer deported to the ghettos in Eastern Europe, but to the death camps, such as Treblinka, Sobibor and Auschwitz-Birkenau. The 1.9 million Jewish victims from the Soviet Union, let alone the 2.7 million from Poland, far outnumbered the Jews deported from Greater Germany, with 78,000 from the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, 65,000 from Austria, and 165,000 from the Old Reich. The deportation to the camps involved many people and could impossibly kept secret. Think of soldiers who witnessed as well as railwaymen, not to mention government officials who had to take care of the apartments the Jews left behind. All these people may have simultaneously hidden behind their functionally circumscribed roles, yet pass their little nuggets of knowledge into the general circulation of information. Over the course of 1942, Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, he de-escalated his anti-Jewish rhetoric. Before that, he had even spoke on some occasions about extermination, but now this was toned down. In the months where the killings reached its peak, only a few anti-Semitic articles appeared in German newspapers. Reason for toning down the anti-Jewish rhetoric was to avoid giving the Allies ammunition for anti-German propaganda. This had the following result that no explicit words were used. Historian Stargardt put it like this: the incomplete and often vague reference points connected with what people already knew through rumor and hearsay, but the press avoided explicit statements. Goebbels' new tactic experimented with a tacit and collusive way of managing and partially silencing moral disquiet. Instead of waging an explicit propaganda campaign to win public support for the regime's action, as he had originally hoped to do, he would let awareness of the actions seep in and foster a sense of complicity. The result is perhaps best described as a spiral of silence. To illustrate what the effects on German families were, let's give an example. There was this 40-year-old German engineer who was considered as indispensable by the authorities and therefore could keep his job as an engineer and wasn't drafted to serve at the front. Now his brother-in-law was serving at the front, and his brother-in-law had written letters home where he, for example, wrote that there were no longer any Jews left in Kiev, the Ukrainian capital. When his brother-in-law was on leave, the German engineer talked about the fate of the Jews, and he basically expressed his revulsion when it came down to the mass murder of hapless civilians. His brother-in-law stated the following: "At first I didn't understand, but now I know. It's a matter of existence or non-existence. Certainly it has gone so far that they will do to us as we had done to them if we should lose the war." The engineer did not want to contradict his brother-in-law and therefore remained silent. So the conversation ended. And this here created some kind of knowing without knowing. People made efforts not to know. If people claimed they didn't know, it was due to their efforts not to know. Also, the Catholic Church in Germany remained quiet, contradicting to earlier, because earlier they protested against the gassing of psychiatric patients, but now they remained silent. What did the German people know about the death camps? By the end of 1942, there were many sources about what happened to the Jews in the East. Countless of soldiers had witnessed, or in some cases participated in the mass executions of Jews. The names of Sobibor and Treblinka were widely known among the German public. However, information about what exactly happened in these places remained sketchy. A very few visitors were allowed inside the gassing facilities. One of the very few was a Waffen-SS officer, Kurt Gerstein. He was the head of the technical disinfection services and had to advise on how to disinfect clothes. He witnessed the arrival and gassing of Jews who came from Lviv, Lemberg, now known as Lviv. And later he took the train back to Berlin. He shared a cabin with a Swedish diplomat. And he told the Swedish diplomat about what he saw. And he urged him to tell the world. The Swedish diplomat, he wrote a report, but this was buried by the Swedish government. Gerstein reached out to the Swiss legation, also to the Catholic Church, but to no avail. He also contacted his father, a retired judge, who remained unmoved. As knowledge spread, it didn't directly raise the topic of moral responsibility, since there was no public discussion, only a few condemned in silence what was going on, which also had to do with the following. As news from the vicinity of the camps rapidly spread, errors crept in. Tales of mass electrocution started to spread, even reaching Warsaw. A German captain who was stationed in Warsaw, I actually mentioned him earlier in the video about the German perspective on the occupation of Poland. He wrote that he had heard that Jews near the city of Lublin were being burned alive by electrically heated chambers. And then there were also rumors about gas tunnels, which cropped up in different diaries of German citizens throughout the Reich. Then there was a fake story of Jews being turned into soap, and this gave way to dark humor among German citizens, all to mask the feeling of unease and responsibility. This all shows that most Germans were aware of the camps, yes. People died there, yes. But under which exact circumstances they weren't aware of. Also about the numbers. Even Nazi leaders weren't up to date on the exact numbers of how many people were killed. As the war progressed, German cities throughout the Reich were bombed systematically. A German merchant, he witnessed the bombing of Hamburg in 1943, and he wrote the following about it. The attacks count as retaliation for our treatment of the Jews. And other voices were like, if only we had not treated the Jews so badly, or what happened with the Jews is being avenged now. Interesting enough is that many German people linked it to the 1938 pogrom, because that was basically the last openly anti-Semitic action, apart from the deportations of course, that lingered in the mind of the people. Many German people saw the year of 1938 as the year that the war against the Jews began, which set in motion a chain of escalating mutual retaliation. As people felt impelled to express a sense of culpability and regret, their admissions of guilt were also irretrievably entwined with an overwhelming sense of their own vulnerability and victimhood. Towards the end of the war, as the Allies approached the German camps, the Germans killed off the inmates and many were put on a death march in the bitter winter cold, which many people perished because of exposure and malnutrition. As Americans liberated several camps, they gathered the civilians of nearby towns and villages, making them clear the bodies or let them walk past the bodies to witness, to show them what their government had done. A coined phrase was, "Davon haben wir nichts gewusst." We knew nothing about that. You can judge for yourself. Was it a matter of not knowing or not wanting to know? The topic of the death marches, as well as the Americans forcing German citizens to watch the atrocities of the Nazis, as well as the other people who became victim of Nazi terror. There's much more to cover. Big shout out to my patrons and a special thanks to Philip Jordan, Jakob Mosland, Nick Terranova, Haley Berry, Mark Little Hale, Janusz Dojogiewicz, Joanne, Justin Trabell, Peter King, Tanya Dixie, Henry Clarkson, Rob Park, Andrea Martic, Ilya Yud, Fernando Lopez Ojeda, and Mike West. If you'd like to know more about what happened to the Jews during World War II, you can click right here. Thank you so much for watching. It's a sensitive topic. It's very dark, but I hope you found this video interesting. So thanks again for watching. All the best. Never forget.